Welcome fellow Airsoft players and enthusiasts, channel host Marshmallow. And in this series we are going to be tackling the Krytac LMG, more specifically the upgrades that we're going to put into it. This will be a multi-part series, but a great one nonetheless, so stick around. One thing I want to make note on real quick before I do the reassembly process, it came up when I had the gearbox fully assembled that I wanted to give it an actual test as far as feeling all parts, because earlier when I was in the program I didn't have it fully assembled. I was just testing with the gears in this, which I'm glad I did, because upon doing that the gears pulled the piston back about maybe 3 or 4 teeth worth and then just hung up. And I'll put it on the screen. I'll show you the error that was coming up from the Aster, but it was basically saying that either A, the sector gear couldn't be sensed, or B, there's an issue with the motor. Now, after multiple trial and errors, what turned out was the aftermarket piston that I was going to put in just did not, for whatever reason, work with the Krytac gearbox. I don't know if it was the tracks that these ride in or what. All I know is it didn't work. So I took that out, went with the stock piston, and put the max piston head on there, and we're good to go and it's working. So I just wanted to touch base on that real quick. So now what I'm going to do is start the reassembly. The one thing I didn't put here yet is the ambidextrous little gear, so I'm going to put that in right now. Alright, that's all set. Now we will assemble it into the lower. One thing to make note with the Krytac is this little and this needs to go in before the gearbox, because as you can see is it goes in at an angle first to push down and then it locks in. If you just try to go straight down with it, it won't fit all the way. So you need to put this in first before you do everything else. As long as we're on the topic with that, as we know, this is our left side that controls the safety, and then option 1 and option 2. The other side here where we just put this gear in, that's where the other gear needs to go. Now the two things here is, one, there's a little notch pointing up and down here, and there's also one on this gear right here by my thumb. And they need to line up with this bad boy here. So what I'm going to do is put this guy up into pretty much the up and down position, which would be your first option, probably semi. I'll put that there, and then I will put this gear in as well, so then that way they match up. So this gear here is now straight up and down with that line, and our gear on this side are up and down, so we're good to go there. So now what I'm going to do is gotta kind of play this fun game here, because you want to make sure that this little buddy doesn't fall out, and you want to make sure he doesn't fall out. Now before we get into that, if you can hit the subscribe button, hit the like, leave your comments. They're important to me. It helps give me some good feedback on things that I can improve or things that you all liked. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Got that. Perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to just get this first pin in. Now, one thing to make note with your body pins is, as you'll see, there's one that I have in my left hand. This is perfect circle, and the other one's got kind of a spot here cut off to where it's like a little crescent. And when you look at the when you look at your lower, in the rear, perfect circle, and then to the front, try to get there, there you go. You see how it's kind of flat? So that's a good way to double check yourself if you kind of forget where it goes. So I'm going to put this first pin in. There we go. And I'm not going to quite put that screw in yet. What I'm going to do real quick is, if you can kind of see, is right now, remember that little line I was talking about that we matched up? If you can see, that's pointing at safe. On the other side, I'm going to turn this to semi, and yep, that went to semi, and now I'm going to turn it to auto and move to auto. That's just another way to double check everything before you get much further. From here, I'm going to put in, there's this little pin, the actual body pin that holds the gearbox a little more firmly. And in the directions it'll show you, but I just happen to remember there's a little bit of a kind of groovy gear looking kind of side. You'll see it. It's hard for me to point out, but maybe right here it's not so smooth, and the rest of it is. The smoothest part goes in first, and then eventually you'll get to a point where you probably can't push any further. So then you just take a little hammer to it and flatten it out. So there we go. So now we got that guy all set, and seeing that I got that, I'm going to go ahead and put this screw in. Next, we'll put the magazine release in. That goes right here, and this is where all that is. I kept this all together. Got this tiny, tiny little screw, that, and the spring. And there's only one direction it can really go. If you look right here, that hole, that's the other part of the gearbox itself, and that's where this guy goes. It slides right through, and all set. So I'm just going to hold that with my finger, come back to the other side, and from here, this is where you put your spring in. I don't think the direction really matters because it looks the same both sides. And I'll get that away first. But if you look at it, this is not a full circle either. It's got like a little slash on each side. I'll bring it up. Right here, see how it's like a little flat there? That is how this guy sits in. So it just kind of has matching, there you see right there. So matches in perfectly like that. Just a little tip. And that's all set. So we'll do our functions test. Push here, looks good. Look down inside, we can see that. Excellent. So now that part of the lower is set, we'll move on to the next part where we got to put our other switch in there. That's this little bugger right here, and this has a tiny little screw. Okay, good to go. That is all set there. And now we will move on to the handle and the motor.